Going into the last provincial election, the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario looked poised for a win. Didn't turn out that way. Party leader Tim Hudak took responsibility and passed the baton. But he didn't pass into history. Today, he's got his eye on Ontario's sharing economy and a promising bill before the legislature to show for it. He joins us now for a look back and a look ahead. Here's Tim Hudak, PC, MPP for Niagara West, Glanbrook, and the former leader of the party. It's good to see you again.
Good seeing you again. Thanks
Happy to have you here.
It's my pleasure.
Not at all. You've become very passionate about this so-called sharing economy stuff. How'd you get onto that?
Two stories, so I'll make it interesting. It'll be the second story first.
All right.
So doing a lot of meetings when I'm here in Toronto, and quite frankly, I get a little frustrated with the cab service, and some didn't know where Queen's Park was. This is probably late 2014. One of my 20-something staff members said, "Why don't you try Uber?" And I said, "What the heck is Uber?"
You didn't know?
Didn't know what it was. Sounded suspiciously German.
Okay.
But I said, I'll give it a try. Right. And then I got in one and thinking, holy smokes, I can track the guy on my iPad. He was happy to have me in the car. I can rate him. And by the way, he rates me to make sure I follow my mom's direction to be well-mannered. Mm-hmm. And I said, this is so good, government's going to mess it up. So I said, how can I ensure that we have this choice? I looked at best practices in the States, for example, and brought forward a bill called Opportunity in the Sharing Economy.
What do you want that bill to do?
Basically would legalize three key areas of the sharing economy: ride sharing like Uber, home sharing like Airbnb, and then parking sharing. We have some great Canadian companies, actually right here in Ontario, Rover and Honk Mobile, to help you find a parking spot before you leave home, for example. Book it, navigate there. So legalize these services. It would have basic, modern, streamlined consumer protections, like making sure the drivers have a clean driving record, that they have insurance, and it'd be on a province-wide basis. What does it do? Gives us a choice as consumers. It also empowers people to make a little bit extra money from things they already own, like their car or their home.
I'm gathering the folks in the taxi industry aren't thrilled with you?
I don't blame them, right? And it's tough for them. But look, I hear a lot of cab drivers that also work for Uber. There are cab drivers, too, that have had a system that doesn't work for them. The rich license owners have objected to that, but cab drivers often have to pay cash for the privilege of driving the car. Here's the other side of the equation. I think that we should free up the cab drivers to compete. Some of the regulations have been around since the 1960s and 70s. American jurisdictions that legalized Uber continue to have a cab industry. It's smaller, but it's still there because you actually need that choice at the end of the day.
You ready for my first smart-ass question here?
I thought we already had a couple.
How'd you get here today?
Oh, yeah, so this is great. Demonstrates, right, why you need choice. So the risk with Uber sometimes is you might not have the best driver and then you rate them badly. So I was actually coming here from Queen's Park today and my driver kept missing Queen's Park.
Your Uber driver?
My Uber driver kept driving to Queen's Park. So canceled it, bad rating. And then a really good guy named Sammy was driving by in a cab. I'm waving my arms out there. I got to get a Pake and Show on time to be on the agenda. And he took me here, and he's a great gentleman. He's watching the show tonight, so Sammy, thanks for the excellent service.
You got here in Sammy's cab.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you want to have a chance for Sammy to compete, do better, get more business, give us choice as well on the Uber side. And I think we'll get there. Ottawa had some regulations that came forward today. Toronto will be soon. I think it's a matter of time.
What about the people, let's talk about accommodation. Airbnb, for example. You live in a building and you don't want your neighbor to have, all that traffic coming near the neighborhood. What do you do about that? Yeah,
that's a good question. So that was story one, my other sharing economy experience. So when Deb and I take Miller and Maitland on vacation, we've often gone south along the ocean, and we faced a choice. You could rent 2 hotel rooms, in which case it's pretty expensive. Mm-hmm. You could rent 1 hotel room, and then with little kids, nobody sleeps. Mm-hmm. So we said, why don't we actually just rent a cottage or a place, which we did through Home Away. It's like Airbnb. So I said, let's offer more choices, and then people can make money. The average Airbnb host in Chicago, for example, a city not that much different from Toronto, makes about $8,000 a year. Big down payment on the mortgage, pay the kids' tuition, all that. So you make a good point. So what do you do about the neighbors? I think, though, we should let this happen and then see how much actual complaints do occur. I think we need to take a different look, 2016 and beyond, where bureaucrats and politicians start asking a different question. They should say, instead of the old way, why should I allow this to happen? Let's start asking, why should I interfere?
Okay, let's not talk about bureaucrats and politicians. Let's talk about condo boards. There are already condominiums that have passed regulations in their units saying, sorry, we're not up for this. Would those regulations that they have passed be rendered null and void under your bill.
Under my bill, no. So I did my homework, and as I mentioned, I looked at the best practices across the world on home sharing. And the choice I made there was individual condos will set the rules around individual condo members and units. I suspect that over time that will shift. And I bet a lot of the condos going up, like Liberty Village in the downtown Toronto area, are going to increasingly allow this. They'll allow the parking spots to be shared through a Rover or Honk Mobile. It's a revenue source for the owner and a revenue source for the board. But let them make that transition. But I'll make you a bet right now in 2016, maybe sometime down the road, if we're both still hanging around. I bet we will look back and actually find it surprising that we even had this debate.
You think
From an environmental and economic
non-story
point of view, we'll go through a rough transition, but at the end of the day, people will look back and say, wow, I can't believe they had that debate, that you would argue that a room or house should stay vacant just for the sake of it.
Was it Chicago you were saying, where it's $8,000 a year?
It is.
My hunch is, I don't know this for sure, my hunch is there's not a lot of tax being paid on that $8,000 of revenue. How much tax avoidance do you think is going on with this sharing economy?
Difficult to say, but here's what I would do about it. Make it easier to pay those taxes. So Ted Graham is a lead thinker on the sharing economy, works here in Toronto. He actually drives an Uber as well, being a consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers. And so he actually tried, this is a smart guy, tried to pay his taxes on his Uber income, and he found it baffling to do so. So first, make it easy for people to do so. If we legalize and have clear rules, more incentive to pay the taxes. And in the UK, where they're way ahead of us, the recent David Cameron budget actually gave a tax credit to people on the first £3,000 of their income through the sharing economy. They wanted to create more micro entrepreneurs. I like that concept. I want to see more here.
Your bill, you know, I don't have to tell you, private members' bills usually die a irrelevant and anonymous death at Queen's Park, but yours actually passed second reading last October quite overwhelmingly. One more reading to go, eh? When do you think that's going to happen?
Fingers crossed now that it's a lead story Thursday night on the agenda. Here's what I did too. Like, I've been around a while. I can be as partisan with the best of them, and I know how to get things done. So I actually sat down with Charles Sousa, the finance minister, David Orazietti, the consumer minister, and I got their advice to. I said, here's where I want to go. What is your advice? And quite frankly, I incorporated a lot of that into my bill. And then we saw a lot of Liberal ministers actually support my bill. The PCs did as well. Not all the Liberals, but most. And whether it gets through committee and gets passed or not, I think there's an inevitability. Mars just came out with a report that was very much directionally like my report. Not 100%, but heading the same direction. So at the very least, Steve, I hope I move this ball up the hill.
Okay. Let me set up the next part of our discussion by saying there's a tendency in journalism, I guess, to look forward all the time without looking back so much. And even though it's been almost 2 years, I do want to take advantage of the fact that you're here today and look back at the events of June 12, 2014, when you led your party into the election and it didn't go the way you wanted it to go. Should we put this graphic up here and just remind everybody what happened? Tim, I don't think you need reminding, but we'll remind everybody else. The Liberals won 58 seats that night, the Conservatives 28, and the NDP 21. And I just wonder what election night was like for you.
It's tough. And it was a surprise, too. We thought we were going to win. We thought it would be close, but we thought we were going to win. Some pollsters had us winning. A lot of the media stars were there to cover our campaign headquarters in Grimsby. So if you lose, it's tough because you put your heart, body, and soul, let alone the sacrifices of that Debbie made, my wife and family, right, to get me to that point. And a surprise, that's even tougher. But that's the business I chose. That's the stakes of the game. You go home, you have a couple of drinks, you feel bad about it, you get up the next day, it's still an honor to serve. But I did have a very clear plan for the province and a plan that I still believe is the right way to get us ahead.
Why do you think the public didn't support you enough?
In some ways, I think looking back, I sort of came across like the doctor who told the diabetic patient they needed insulin. And the Liberals' campaign was just take more sugar. And the sugar got the votes this time around. I think we had the right diagnosis for what ails the province in terms of government's too big, we spend too much money, we're in too much debt. We need to revitalize private sector job creation. But at the end of the day, the Liberals got more votes. People preferred their plan and their leader to me. That's life. But honest to God, it was an incredible opportunity to be on that stage, to put forward a plan that I believed in my gut, still believe in today. It's just been a tremendous honor and probably the best 5 years of my life being leader of the PC party.
Is it hard to look at yourself in the mirror and say, they liked her better than they liked me? No, because you just said it. Is it hard to come to that recognition?
No, you learn it pretty hard and fast, I guess, when the results come in, especially if it's prized. You take a shot in the gut, but you dust yourself up. I still have a microphone. I'm one of the privileged few 107 that can walk into that assembly. I'm proud of what we stood for and our vision for the future. And I still have a role to play, like what we talked about earlier on. I launched sharingeconomy.ca, my next wave on the sharing economy. I've got a bit more time with my beautiful little girls, Miller and Maitland, catching up with Debbie. I can be a dad and a husband again. Well, I'm doing a better job as dad. You can check with Debbie on the husband side. There are trade-offs.
Do you regret anything from your time as leader?
It's not the way I play that game. It's
inevitable that you go back. I mean, every politician I've ever talked to, even if they only look forward, it's inevitable you're going to go back and say, damn it, if I'd only done that differently.
I don't know. So the answer to the question is no. I do not have regrets because I put forward a clear, distinct, a plan that fit together for what I diagnosed as the problems in the province. And I know people will say, well, you shouldn't have said what you said. Let's reset to what the reality was.
You should, you know, they're saying you shouldn't have promised to fire 100,000 public servants.
Which is not exactly the promise. But
excuse me, you're right. You promised to eliminate 100,000 public service positions.
Exactly.
Which was different from firing 100,000 people.
And largely through attrition and such.
Yes.
But here's what I want to make. So you walk into the campaign in 2014, and people are using today's, I think, view of the current Liberal government to 2014. Kathleen Wynne, to her credit, actually done a very good job in putting a lot of the Dalton McGuinty water under the bridge, so to speak. She was seen as having the right motives, trying to work with people. She brought forward her own agenda, and we went into that campaign. We were actually slightly behind in that campaign. So we actually had to make some choices on how we attract attention to issues we thought were best in our interest and the right prescription for the province, which we did. The other way I look at this, Steve, is those who object to saying that I shouldn't have talked about reducing the civil service by 100,000 positions either have two arguments. One, we shouldn't have said that at all, and we should have kept the civil service the same size, which means that we're trying to out-liberal the Liberals and embracing higher taxes or bigger debt. Or the second side of the equation is we should have lied about it.
Right.
And that's not me. I also believe that people see through that. And I needed a mandate to bring in the kind of changes that I talked about. If I had lied about it and tried to bring in that kind of mandate, I wouldn't have been honest with myself.
But you might
and
have won.
secondly, I don't think we would. I disagree with that because I think people see through it when you don't believe it and a plan doesn't fit together. At the end of the day, to make the kind of changes that are necessary, I needed a mandate.
I know you don't respect the Premier's political agenda, right? You just think she's on the wrong track. But clearly there's something about her that people, I don't want to exaggerate this, but trust, like, accept, embrace. Not the majority of the people in Ontario. She didn't get the majority of the votes, but she got the largest number of votes. What do you think that is?
So, you know, I can take a step back and look at these things, a couple more gray hairs on the side of my head and 21 years under my belt. And I got to sit down actually with Kathleen Wynne a number of occasions, leader to leader. Highly personable, comes across as very warm and engaging. I think the way she came across the election campaign was having the right motives in place. Certainly made a lot of promises to people. Now, almost 2 years hence, a lot of those promises cast aside or embraced parts of my plan. But I think it was the sincerity. She's a very driven politician individual, which I respect, having been in this game for a long time.
She's way more competitive than people think she is.
Yeah, it's an interesting combination of when you come across as having the right motives and sincerity and listening with that drive underneath that skin. It's been, look how well she's climbed the ladder. Now she's Premier after being reelected and winning her own party's leadership.
What does it do? I don't want to put you on a couch too much here, but I do need to ask this. What does it do to your self-confidence to lose 2 consecutive elections?
Well, you know you're not going to get a third shot at it. Look, I came from a pretty normal family in Fort Erie, Ontario. My folks are retired teachers. I never aspired to think I'd have the chance on that stage, let alone being Premier. I got elected, as Woody Allen says, showing up as 90% of success by running in the right riding and a sweep under Mike Harrison and climb the ladder. Just the chance to be there, to put on the stage, to speak from the heart, to put forward a clear plan was tremendously rewarding. Do I wish I'd win? You betcha. And I think it's right for the province. But do I feel like I got a big kick in the teeth or my self-esteem? Quite the opposite. I thought the chance to be on the stage and to perform, I'm damn proud of that.
Okay, but again, I've talked to lots of politicians over the years, and some of them who have been in your shoes say it takes a year or more to recover, because it's not a professional repudiation, it is a personal repudiation. And it takes a year or more to recover from that personal repudiation. Has that been the case with you?
I don't know. Certainly, you do some contemplation afterwards, right? Do you continue on? And what you said, I think, is very fair. A tougher part, too, is when the team moves on from you after you've led the team as a very cohesive unit. So that ain't easy to take either, but it, again, is part of the business. So you think about, do you stay on or do you leave? Most leaders chose to leave. And I said, I'm not going to have this chance again, so I'm going to use the microphone I've been given. Did I retreat a little bit? Yeah, I took some time away, but I was back pretty fast. And I think I found a way to engage in policy which is motivating to me, but more importantly, I think important to Ontario's future.
How uncomfortable is it for a former leader to sit in a caucus and see another guy there who used to have your job?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, it's not easy having been in the driver's seat and then you go into the back seat. So that's a bit different. But he worked hard. He won that contest. I wasn't part of that contest. It's the way life is. So here's what you do. You give advice where it's needed. You stay out of the way if you needed to stay out of the way. And then the leader makes the calls and you move on. That's what I expected of my caucus, and that's the role I'll play as part of the BC caucus.
Speaking of moving on, most leaders who lose elections move on. It's not unheard of for a leader to stick around. I think Bob Nixon did it. I think Donald MacDonald did it in Ontario history. William Hague in the UK did it. World party leaders lost, stayed. Why did you choose to do that?
I like it. They said earlier on, just to be one of the privileged few who can be there. You can advance issues. I missed my riding. When you're leader, you make a big sacrifice to be away. Last night I was at the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce Business Awards. I hadn't been to that event for 8-9 years. It's nice. People are happy to see. I'm Tim there as well, not Mr. Hudak or leader or whatever. It's very enjoyable. I got a beautiful place to represent. Truthfully, there's more balance in life too. When you're leader, you don't see the family that much. You sort of kiss your daughter on the forehead as she sleeps and you're gone before she wakes up. I see them a lot more. I can do things with Maitland that sorry about that.
Tim, I'll tell you something. Everybody who knows you says you're a great dad and you love your kids more than anybody. Good for you.
Yeah. So things that I missed with Miller, I can do now with Maitland.
I want to thank you so much for coming in tonight and sharing your obviously deeply held feelings about this. We haven't done this before, and you're immense for doing so. Thanks so much.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for me back on the show.
That's Tim Hudak, PC MPP, Niagara West Glanbrook.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.